they carefully, I don't know, it might sound a little weird, but they carefully chose their shapes. Like the main character is adorable. Like just like the way that like they're small and like very simple.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Red Essence Games podcast. I'm Nick.
I'm Paloma.
And we are lifelong gamers as well as game developers. And today's topic is going to be a really fun one for both of us because we are both artists on our game Traveler's Refrain, and we are going to be talking about unique art styles and art styles in games that have impacted us. And we'll also kind of dive into, like, as artists on a game ourselves, like how we're thinking during the development process to make sure that the style is resonating and also feels consistent throughout the project. So stay tuned for that. That'll be more towards the end of the episode. But before we dive into that, I do want to tell you a little bit about Traveler's Refrain. It is a game that is now available to Wishlist on Steam, so you can go check that out. And our game is basically about a traveling musician that goes to find his long-lost love in this ancient secret forest. And if you're into like more old-school style games, but with a modern flair and modern controls, like this game is definitely going to be for you, so go check that out on Steam. But before we get into any of this topic stuff, I went to Waco last week and I got to see the totality of the solar eclipse, which was awesome.
That's so cool.
And anytime we're in a new city, I go and check out a retro game store. So I'm a huge game collector and I love physical games. I just love like the tactile feel, like putting a cartridge in or whatever, putting the disc in. So we found this cool retro game store in Waco called oh man, I'm gonna have to like put this in text. I think it was called Fix something. I'm gonna have to put it in. But either way, like it was in a mall we found, and it had the biggest selection of retro games I've ever seen, and it was all reasonable prices too. I don't know if you've been into any of these stores recently.
No, I haven't.
No. They're like starting to really hike up prices, even for like games that are like not super, I don't know, popular or whatever.
That's weird.
So I felt that the prices were really fair. So I want to show you some of these games. I'm curious, audience as well, if you guys have played any of these, because I picked up like a bunch of weird ones.
Okay.
So first of all, I have a Game Boy that I modded. I took an old Game Boy and I modded it to have a black shell and white buttons and like an IPS screen. So it's almost like an iPhone quality screen.
I didn't know you could do that.
It's sick. I'll show you after the stream. But it's an incentive for me to go back and play some of these just like games that, you know, you just lay in bed and play a couple levels of games like this. But I picked up a couple of these Disney games. So the first one is, what is this? Mickey's Dangerous Chase.
Wow.
Which is so random. But what's cool about this one, and I picked up the Little Mermaid game as well.
Oh my gosh.
They're developed by Capcom.
Wow.
So Capcom got the licenses for all of these old Disney IP back in the day. And it's funny too, because you're playing Dragon's Dogma 2 right now, right?
Yeah, I actually just beat it last night.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
All right, you're going to have to tell me about that in a second. But it's just hilarious that now they're making games like that. And back in the day, they were making these Disney games. And you can kind of see, I feel, Capcom's like developer essence in some of these old games, because you think licensed games, you think like, oh, they're going to be kind of boring and not fun. But I don't know, for Game Boy games, I thought these had pretty cool mechanics. So with the Mickey game, it's kind of like a Mario type platformer, but the main mechanic is there's blocks and you can pick them up and throw them. So that's sort of how you proceed through the levels. And I should mention as well, what's brutal about these games, there's no save states.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
So
my gosh. Games used to be harder, huh?
I know. Like Bloodborne level difficulty.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, I also have a Retron 5, which is it's like a console that you can play Game Boy games, Game Boy Color, you can play Nintendo, Super Nintendo. And what's cool about that is you can actually save, like, because it kind of dumps the ROM onto the console and you can save whenever. So I kind of scummed my way through through Mickey just because I wanted to beat it and see how it plays. And then the Little Mermaid game, it's got a little bit more intricate mechanics. She basically like throws bubbles at the enemy. Obviously she's
Oh,
swimming and
that's fun.
stuff, and you can capture the enemies, and it's kind of similar where you can grab them then in a bubble and throw them at enemies.
Oh,
So
fun.
yeah, these are just like, I don't know, to kind of mess around with sort of games. This one though, so this is King's Knight. This is an old Squaresoft game. So Squaresoft, before it was Square Enix. And what's cool about this game is this predates Final Fantasy 1.
Oh my gosh.
So imagine what Squaresoft was kind of making before they, had their big franchise, and before they, merged with Enix and, had the Dragon Quest IP and all of that kind of stuff. So this game is super weird. You basically play as 4 different characters, and imagine like a vertical side scroll. It's not a side scroller, but a vertical scroller. And it almost plays like Galaga, or one of those kind of shooting games. And there's enemies that come down, you kind of shoot them and stuff. But the game cycles through the 4 characters. So every time you die, you go to the next character. And the objective is you want to get to the end of the level with each of the characters. And you want to find these little like equipment things, like defense buffs and like extra shots and like, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that you beat the level with all of them. And then the 5th level, you get to play as all of them to fight the final guy or whatever. Honestly, even with save scumming, I could barely get past like the first level with the first character.
Wow.
It's just brutal. Maybe I didn't give it enough time, but this was more one I just wanted to have in my collection because I'm such a huge like Final Fantasy fan, and I just thought it was cool. Also, I love the cover art. I love these this like 90s,
oh man,
80s,
awesome.
90s like anime sort of style. So yeah, I thought that one was cool. And then I know you have told me about this one.
I love that game. I love
So,
Tunic so much.
I picked up Tunic, and this is one that I'm actually really happy I bought the physical.
It looks great
Because it comes with the manual. The pages you find in the game.
Yes.
It comes with the full thing. So somebody on Instagram was like, don't look through it because it kind of spoils a lot of the secrets, right? So I've been kind of resisting the urge to look through it.
Yeah.
And the game itself, if you open it up, it comes with like stickers and a bunch of like fun stuff, a map. So I love especially when newer developers and indie devs especially give you like little presents.
Yeah, that game was so cool. Like the manual in the game is so unique. And I think you actually gather the pages in the game. So it's probably why you don't want to look through it right now.
Yeah. I played like, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes of it the other day. And so far it's just like, it's a beautiful game.
Yes.
And it's very like bouncy. Like everything you get, like the coins and stuff, they bounce into
it's
you.
Cute.
It's really
charming.
Cute. It's just like relaxing,
It
know,
is.
especially coming off of playing FF7 Earth. It's just like sometimes I need to just veg out a little bit. So I played a bit of all of those games, and then again, like I said, I've been playing FF7 Rebirth, and it's so intense. But on PS Plus, there's a game called Skull, SKUL. So that's another one I've been playing a little bit of. It's a roguelite game, I think.
Okay. Kind
of like we were talking about last week. And you play as this little skeleton dude, and you find different skeleton heads throughout your run-throughs, and you can replace it with your head, and each head gives you a new ability set.
Oh, that's fun.
And then on top of that, you get buffs and stuff, and I think they said there's like 100 different heads throughout the game. So there's a ton of flexibility in terms of how you want to play through it. So you have PS Plus, right?
Yes.
You should try it out. Just mess around with it a little bit. I'd be curious to see what you think about it. But yeah, I've been playing that one too. So I'm kind of like all over the place with my gaming right now. But I go through these phases where I'm like, I just need to like play some really fun, like smaller type experiences.
Yeah,
for
sure.
Have you been playing anything new? Or you did say you just beat Dragon's Dogma too.
I did, yeah.
What'd you think of the ending?
So there's multiple endings.
Okay.
I went with what I guess people call the good ending.
Okay.
Because I was just sort of ready to end the game.
Yeah.
Because there is like what's called the true ending where you access end game content kind of stuff.
Got it.
Where it's like a bit more difficult. But I was like, not right now. I want to go back to FF16 and like prepare for the DLC.
That's right. Oh man, I'm psyched for that.
I know, I'm
That'll
stoked. And honestly, just hopping back on FF16 was such a breath of fresh air.
Really?
Yeah, I was kind of getting burnt out from the open world of Dragon's Dogma. I wanted something a little bit more linear.
Sure. Yeah, and FF16 is really funny too because it kind of feels like, because I just got off playing a bunch of the original Final Fantasies last year. I played like 1, 2, and 3. I beat them all. And FF16 very much feels like an old Final Fantasy in the fact that you go in kind of an open zone, right? And then there's just monsters everywhere that you can just fight. It feels like that old school battle system, but obviously with action combat. So I don't know if anybody else is like as hardcore of a Final Fantasy fan as I am and has that same feeling, because I know a lot of people that have really been into Final Fantasy are like, oh, it's such a divergence from what the essence of Final Fantasy is. But I feel like that one, even more so than the FF7 remakes, felt more true Final Fantasy, or at least the way I've interpreted it. So
I've only played a couple, so
yeah, we got to get you playing more. You should maybe play some of the really old ones, because I know you're not super into turn-based, but they're not very long either. So you can kind of, especially if you play like the remasters, you can speed up combat and stuff like that. So you can kind of just blow through them to see how the stories go. Okay, so before we get into talking about game art styles that we love, I saw this new trailer for this new Prince of Persia game that they kind of like shadow dropped.
Okay.
And it has an insane art style. So I want to live react with you about this and kind of see what your thoughts are and see kind of how you're interpreting what they're doing with this, because it's really weird that they just dropped another Prince of Persia game. Like,
I'm not familiar with it.
So there's one they put out like I want to say a couple months ago, and it was another side scroller. I haven't played it yet, but it's another one of those like, man, is it even a roguelite or is it a Metroidvania? I don't know. Chat, like, let me know if you guys have played it and if you liked it too, because historically I've actually played pretty much every one of the Ubisoft Prince of Persia games. I played the originals and some of those ones that 1, 2, and 3, and some of those random ones that came out after. Have you played any Prince of Persia games?
No. I have no idea what it's about.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a franchise I think you'd like too, because they kind of have like a endearing kind of storyline and just fun game mechanics. All right, so let's check this out.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm. I feel like specifically this kind of art style it reminds me of like the Castlevania show on Netflix. Have you seen any of that?
I haven't, but I really like the traditional kind of animation feel.
I'm glad it's kind of coming back.
Yeah. I always wanted 2D animation to make a comeback.
Yeah. Not that I don't like the 3D stuff, but there's just something, it's like you can stylize 2D a lot more, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Go crazier with like weird camera angles and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you can be more exaggerative. Like they just really stretched his proportions in that shot.
The perspective.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Oh.
So this is where they're showing you the mechanic in the trailer, which I think is really cool. And then check this out. You're going to freak out. Right into gameplay.
Wow.
And it's the same style.
Oh, that's so cool.
Right? This is probably one of the best examples of a trailer I've ever seen, honestly, to showcase the mechanics.
Great. I don't think I've seen a trailer like that.
I know.
And the gameplay looks really fun too.
Right?
Oh, the slow-mo?
Uh-huh.
That's so cool. Oh, that's awesome.
So this has kind of been what Prince of Persia is. I think it started off as like a really old school PC kind of game. And honestly, like, again, chat, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Ubisoft ended up acquiring the rights to it. And it used to be kind of like an old rotoscoped style animation, but it was like pixel art, obviously. And you played as this prince who tries to run, and you get past traps and stuff. That was essentially the mechanics. Like, you could grab onto walls and stuff. So when Ubisoft took over, they started with the Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, and the mechanic in that was that you had this ability to rewind time if you
that's really
died.
cool.
So it was a really cool, interesting mechanic. And then that series kind of, I don't know, went in a weird direction. And I believe that they were going to make another Prince of Persia game, but it ended up turning into what Assassin's Creed became. And you can kind of see like similarities in like the climbing and, you know, the kind of like Middle Eastern aesthetic as well when they went into especially Assassin's Creed 1. So yeah, I love that franchise. I love like the world and just the general aesthetic. I love that kind of music too.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could tell with our own game my direction towards Milan, but in Milan's interest as well, but it kind of feels like Traveler's Refrain kind of music, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that they did a wonderful job with that trailer,
they did.
right?
It was great. Like, it took a second. You had, like you mentioned, like, this is right into gameplay. I'm like, oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So what's kind of interesting too, though, is the fact that they are, even though they started with a 2D trailer, like the graphics in the game are definitely 3D models, like to get him to flip around and do all these like crazy things. So
it's really cool, actually.
Let me actually just.
Yeah, I think I'd like it because I love playing as like a rogue type.
Yeah.
Character.
Yeah, I mean, if we kind of like zoom in, you can kind of see the fact that
I see.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they definitely have like lines on the outside, but it's, you know, they're working with 3D models.
I like it. I like that approach.
Yeah, I think so too. It gives a lot of flexibility. Obviously, we know, you know, having a 2D animated game, how intensive that can get.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I love how like smooth it is, and I love the backgrounds as well.
Yeah, the parallaxing looks really great.
Yeah,
in this game.
Very much bright, poppy, flat colors, and again, this is an aesthetic that I'm seeing quite a lot with 2D stuff. Like, I told you guys, I think, about that show Scavenger's Reign on HBO.
Oh.
I don't know if you remember that, but it's a sci-fi show, and it very much has a similar kind of aesthetic with like the very flat kind of 2D look, but it almost gives a very graphic-y read, right? As opposed to, I feel like older animation styles, like they were trying to get more, I don't want to say realism, but detail, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm super excited to try that game. Because that last Prince of Persia game that I was just telling you about, I'll have to show you that after. But I don't know, it has a cool 3D style, but it wasn't enough to sell me on like, this is different enough from other games I've played. This one is like, there's something about it that I can just feel is gonna have a different experience. So yeah, all right. Why don't we talk about what we specifically think is like dictating cool art styles or unique art styles in games for us. So you want to go first?
Should I start with like my favorite like art style?
Let's save your favorite. Maybe just like think about the games that you have on your list and like maybe try to come up with like some similarities. Like what's doing it for you, basically, you know?
So I think some games come to mind that I sort of like for the same reasons. So you have Journey, made by the company, That Game Company.
Oh, that's
the
right.
name.
Yeah.
They also made Sky, Children of the Light. And then
that's right. I think I played a bit of that.
Yeah.
I think you can play that on mobile, right?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Yeah.
And then there's another indie called The Last Campfire.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want a reference of the art style. I know I've heard of that one, but Oh,
yeah.
I've wanted to play this game.
Yeah. So I really like these because like they're all 3D.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very stylized, not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And they have like a really charming simplicity to the design.
Yeah.
And they can still like make the simplicity really beautiful. And I think all three of them have a really good, and I think Tunic applies to this too.
Mm.
Very simple, like 3D styles, but very atmospheric.
Yeah.
It's like gorgeous.
And I think too with these games is there's intention behind the design
Mm-hmm.
as well. We see a lot of indie games coming out that have a very like simplistic style, 3D
Mm-hmm.
style, but it's like they all kind of blur together in my
Right.
head. But when you see a game like this, like The Last Campfire, it's like there's something special about it, and I think it's because there's like intention with everything.
Yeah.
Right? Like down to the fact that even in this shot there's like it almost feels like the enemy or whatever this is like matches the style of the character. The color palette, like you said, is very atmospheric.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it's like to get to this level with, it's almost like it's expensive, right? To go in a simplistic style, but to make it look absolutely gorgeous because you're having to make sure all of the pieces kind of fit together appropriately. So that's interesting. And it's interesting too that this is more your list. For my list, I think I'm really into like anime. I've always been into cartoons and 2D animation and stuff. So when I think of really cool art styles off the top of my head, they look more like they feel more 2D even though they're not 2D. So an example off the top of my head, and this isn't like necessarily my top one, but even Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, I really like the style because it almost reminds me of like is it Ghibli, however you want to say it, it has that kind of vibe to it. And I just find that very like pleasing and relaxing to look at. So I think the other thing we should preface too is I think most of the games on our list are veering away from the realistic 3D stuff, even though there's some games that have really cool 3D styles. And because we're artists and we're like both painters, I think we're probably going to be picking more games that have like a brushstrokey,
painterly,
painterly quality to
for
them.
Sure.
So I think what's an interesting thing to think about, and again, it's like going back to Tunic, is like what is making it specifically like beautiful, like a beautiful feel.
It's like they carefully, I don't know, it might sound a little weird, but they carefully chose their shapes. Like the main character is adorable. Like just like the way that like they're small and like very simple and endearing, and I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but like subconsciously it's very like attractive to me.
Yeah, and I think they use, I don't know exactly what the effect is, but the fact that it almost feels like you're looking down on like a miniature. It's like they use a camera effect to make it feel like it's like this cute little thing. And did you get to play what is it called? The remaster of Link's Awakening?
No.
Okay. Okay, let me just show you a screenshot of this too. So this is on Switch. This came out a couple years ago.
Okay.
This has the same kind of vibe to it. But what's cool about this is the way they modeled Link the environments. It almost looks like plastic.
Yeah.
So it really does feel like you're playing with like little toys in a world, and it's like everything in this game is just absolutely adorable.
Wow, this kind of reminds me of Animal Crossing.
Yeah. It had. I think the graphics in this though are actually like more quality. Sure. But yeah, you should check this one out. I didn't even have this one on my list, but now that I thought about it, like this is definitely up there in terms of one of the coolest art styles in any video game I've ever seen, just because it's so unique. Like, Tunic did do something similar, but the fact that these devs were intentional about like, what if we make Link look like a toy? It's like such a cool concept. So So yeah, I think the other thing too is besides like some of these Zelda games, a lot of the games that are on my list are indies, and I think a lot of the games on your list are, if not all, are
they're
indies.
like yeah, pretty much all indies.
And actually, you know what? I'm looking at one. So there is one that is not an indie. Did you ever play Child of Light?
No.
So have you seen that one either?
I don't think so.
So that was a Ubisoft game that came out during the PS3 era. And this was bizarre because obviously Ubisoft is not
I've seen this.
Yeah. Ubisoft is a AAA publisher, but there is a weird renaissance of interesting art styles going on around this era. That's like kind of sort of around when Bastion came out. That's when
they look so hand drawn. That's so cool.
Yeah. It was, I believe it was 3D, but it just has this really beautiful like storybook style.
Yeah, I love that so much.
And I think from off the top of my head, the first game to really start this trend, let's call it, was a game called Brave. Have you heard of that? Sorry, not Brave. Braid.
Braid? Oh.
So this game was kind of, from what I know, referencing Super Mario, but it kind of flipped a lot of the mechanics on its head. I actually never played this one, but this kind of had a time reversal mechanic as well, from what I know. Yeah, I mean, there's an hourglass. Cool. But this was, I believe, an Xbox arcade exclusive or whatever Xbox was doing. And I think this game kind of started the indie revolution, let's call it.
Wow.
And this is because back then, you know, the tools like Unity and, you know, Unreal, it's like they weren't as accessible as they are now, and literally just anybody can download them and start messing around. They didn't have Game Maker back then, so it was a lot harder to even get into development unless you were like a hardcore programmer. So it's interesting how we got to this point with consoles where the graphics started to get so good that everybody was like competing, I think, to outdo each other.
Like realism? Or just...
Even, maybe not even necessarily realism, but just like graphical fidelity. So even a game like Kingdom Hearts, like it's very stylized, but it was still like really intense, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's actually cool to think about the fact that the technology got to a point and got more accessible to allow people like us to just take our own art styles and apply it to games like this. And I think that makes for a better gaming society as a whole, let's call it, because there are people like us that can just be like, oh, well, I want to make a game, you know, with my limited resources in the way that I'm envisioning it, and can actually pull that off. So yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of cool to think about, like, going back to some of these games. So, I mean, off the top of my head, you know, I already mentioned the Bastion, for example. Like, all of the Supergiant games are probably like in my top art styles in general. It just has such a clear cut aesthetic to it, and I think it's all due to the fact that they have an artist that's spearheading direction for the art. I'm sorry, I forget what her name is, but I think that's also what is dictating a lot of these types of art styles, is like there's somebody that's deciding like, okay, let's go in this direction and kind of stick with it, you know? So yeah, I mean, Bastion, Transistor, Pyre, Hades, and have you've never played any of these games, right? You would love that.
I know, I need to catch up.
You gotta catch up. Yeah. And these are all relatively short games except for Hades, so yeah, I would literally just start with Bastion, just blow through them. They're just really cool. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, do you have any others off the top of your head that you specifically want to mention? Or?
I wanna throw Sly Cooper out there.
That's a cool one.
Yeah.
I played a little bit of one of them on like Vita or something like that.
I think the first game came out on PS1, and I also played it on PS2, and I think it goes all the way to PS4 or PS3. I don't really remember, but I just love, it's sort of like a 3D comic book style. Like the cut scenes were a comic, like a 2D comic. And I don't know. It was kind of like it was ahead of its time in terms of art style. It was so cool.
I think so too. And what's interesting about that game is that came out when I think it was like, that and Crash Bandicoot and like Jak and Daxter. It was kind of like the mascot platformer type games.
Mm-hmm.
And it is cool because even those other games, they kind of still meld together in a way. Like Ratchet and Clank, they were stylized, but they were like realistic stylized.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And Sly Cooper is cool because it did it always have like line art around the character?
I think so. I think it kind of evolved a little over time, but it sort of like stayed true to the sort of comic feel.
Yeah. They're just looking up some screenshots, but let's see Sly Cooper 1.
Yeah. Yeah, that one right there. Oh, it's small.
Yeah.
He has some like outlines around him.
yeah, that is really cool. And were the cutscenes kind of comic booky too?
Yeah, the cutscenes were like, I mean, there were like 3D cutscenes, but like they also did a bit of storytelling with like 2D comic like
got it
cutscenes. Yeah.
So this actually reminds me of another game that I want you to play. So have you heard of Gravity Rush?
No.
Okay, so if there's any other Gravity Rush fans in the chat, also please let me know, because this is, I don't want to say, man, if I really think about it, this might be one of my favorite games I've ever played in my life. And it's one that I kind of forget about sometimes, and then when I remember it, do you ever have that? You remember something, you're like, wow, that was amazing.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I think it's because nobody really talks about this game, but this game is so underrated. So this originally came out, and I think it's underrated because it originally came out on Vita, which was such a weird console.
Mm-hmm.
And the mechanic is she doesn't necessarily fly, she kind of falls in a direction. So you aim the controller towards a certain space and you hit the button and she'll fall forward. So you can imagine how you can fall in any direction. So you can fall upward as if you're flying and then turn down, fall back down. Wow. And it's like her hair goes up and everything. So that's generally the mechanic. And
I don't see stuff like that anymore.
It's weird. And this is another one too that this is, I believe, is a Sony, I think it was a Sony first party game. Like I think Sony themselves developed this game, and it was like a flagship Vita title to like promote like, oh, this is what our crazy handheld console can kind of do. But it reminded me of Sly Cooper because it also has like that comic booky aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And the cutscenes in this also did that thing where like it was actual comic book panels, but with the 3D models like in the little slots. And it was weird too because this game had like full voice acting, but it was all in a made up language.
Oh,
it was, and if you can see too, again with the kind of Ghibli reference, it has that kind of aesthetic of like
a Howl's Moving Castle type feel.
Exactly,
I see that.
Exactly. So yeah, you're just kind of like in this like crazy like steampunkish sort of world, and she's more or less like a superhero. Like you get like superhero powers. Like she has amnesia. She doesn't know where she came from. And you kind of like make friends throughout the adventure, and you're just like helping out the citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're slowly starting to learn like what happened in her past and where she came from. And when you find that out too, like I'm not going to spoil anything, but it goes like crazy places. Okay. So I would definitely recommend this one, especially as like a super cool art style game.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the other thing too. I think a lot of games do this kind of anime look to them, but again, there's something unique about this specific art style in this game, and maybe that's something as like artists and devs we can analyze as well. It's like, what are these guys doing that are making it feel different from other anime games like the Tales of whatever type games, or you know, or even Zelda, or you know, Zelda kind of has an anime influence. So I think like decisions like the very flat looking hair.
I noticed that.
And almost flat looking skin, but then there's like blush on certain parts of the face, and like the eyes are stylized and they have like the really small pupils. So what's cool too about the character's design in general is they give her this like little cape thing, and they give her really long, clear, bright hair. So when she falls, you're seeing that motion from her cape, from her hair, and you get that real feeling like you're just like blasting off into space kind of thing.
It's so cool. It's very intentional design to enhance that feeling.
Yeah, and even the world too, the fact that it's like the kind of these floating island sort of things gives you more of that feeling like you're in the air and you're just like in an openish kind of area. And what's cool about the level design as well is these floating island type things are multi-tiered. So it's kind of like you can jump off and like fly down and go to a lower level, and there's like new quests and stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's a very, very, very unique game, and was really cool. So like going back to our game as well, that's something that we've had to think about with animation is like movement, right? Because you want your character to feel like they're moving through space, and it's like, how do you design something to be interesting when it's just running? So that's why, like, for example, I gave Traveler his little cloak thing, because when he runs, it kind of has a trail behind him, you know? Even the little white streak in his hair, like, our game is very dark as it is, so just kind of throwing that in, and also because I have gray hair, so it's kind of like an homage to that.
Right.
But that little peak of white like kind of pops him out a little bit from the environment. And what I've been doing with the characters' pupils as well is like they actually have no pupils. It's just the colored iris, and that leads to really big, clear expressions as well, I think.
Yeah, I also really like that there's movement just from him standing. Like he's sort of like breathing or like kind of, there's like still motion in there.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I felt like it was important for us, if we're going to go 2D and we're going to go, you know, frame by frame animation, it's kind of like we got to go all out. Yeah,
you got to go big or go home.
And it's funny too, because I even noticed some other games that I really respect and have like really cool animations, like Sea of Stars. Like I think there's just so much going on in that game, but a lot of their NPCs, when they're standing, they're just like standing still. So as you said, it's like it was important for me to make sure that like there's as much motion in the environment and in the characters as possible. So even the trees have like those shaders, just so it's constantly, we want the world to feel like it's lived in, right?
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's another thing, going back to our lists, that is a correlation factor, is I think a lot of the games that we're picking have a sense of like, not only the character has emotion, but the world itself feels like a character as well.
Yeah.
So like with Journey, for example, that was one that there's a lot to interpret from the environment and from the ruins in particular. But I'm curious, what do you think with games? This is maybe a little bit of a tangent, but like there is a trend, I think, in indie games where I don't know if it's due to limitation or actual artistic integrity, that they're deciding to leave the story super vague.
Oh, I know, right?
And are you into that?
I kind of am, though I do like, I always try to dig for answers though, but I think it helps create like a discussion. It makes people talk about the game.
Yeah.
And I think you might have told me about this like back when we were playing Elden Ring, because the story is kind of vague.
Yeah.
The lore is kind of vague. And I think you were telling me about how, you know, it gets people like talking about it. Or no, I think it was more about like the quest lines actually.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of builds a community. When you leave something so vague that someone has to piece something out, it causes somebody to search for like, what does this mean?
Yes.
And then it starts discussion. So, but with some of these indies, I don't even know if that is necessarily the intention, or if it was just like with Journey, they're like, okay, we have the budget to do like this really cool atmospheric environment and lighting, and we're putting a lot of our resources into the art, but we're not going to go and do voice acting. And, you know, that's what I'm not sure about. And I know studios differ from, you know, studio to studio, but it's definitely a trend I've seen a lot in indie games.
Yeah.
And for us with our game, it's like, I just want to tell us
yeah
a solid story, you know what I mean? And like we definitely have like things that people can interpret, but I like feeling like you're, I guess a good way to put it is like playing through a book or playing through a movie or something like that. So I don't know. Another game that comes to mind, and maybe this is something art wise that is a really good reference point, is did you ever play Hyperlight Drifter? Oh man, that's another one. And to be honest, I never ended up beating that game. I kind of fell off of it, but here, let me show you. This was another game that very, very vague, and the characters, from what I remember, when you talk to an NPC, they spoke in images. So it was kind of like
cool.
You had to infer what they were even saying as well. And what's cool about this game is the director, the guy that was leading the project, he has some sort of heart condition. So that's why his studio is called The Heart Machine. And there's a lot of those sorts of homages, I guess, in this game. That's kind of like the basis of the
that's cool
philosophy behind the game, right? So yeah, it is cool, but for me, I don't know. I'm playing it and it's kind of like I want a little bit more literal.
Yeah, a little bit more specifics.
Yeah.
I definitely have felt that way before.
Yeah. But this is another game that's really cool, and I don't have a lot of like pixel art games on my list because I feel like a lot of games that are pixel art kind of look samey to me, but this game in particular has a very solid pixel art style. And I guess if we put our game dev hats on again and kind of analyze this, I think it's because the flat colors are so prominent. Like even the ground in this specific shot has it's like variations of blue, but it's like pretty monochromatic, and it allows that character to really pop out. And then the monsters as well are like essentially like flat green, right? So they're really popping out too. Even shots like this was like, I think from the intro, like at the beginning of the game, he's going very, very monochromatic with the color
like
power.
Giving me Attack on Titan vibes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool though.
But yeah, this leads to another kind of like pleasing but kind of ominous and mysterious aesthetic, which I think is really, really cool in indie games. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is another one maybe try out and let me know what you think.
Okay.
All right, let me just see some of the other ones I have off the top of my head. I mean, you're seeing my list. Have you played any of these other ones that
I've played Hollow Knight.
Okay. What do you think about Hollow Knight?
Hollow Knight, visually amazing.
Yeah.
I thought it was really awesome how kind of reminds me of our game, how the background is pretty like painterly and illustrative. The things that like move like have like lines around them, like the bosses and the enemies and the character. It's pretty cool.
And what's cool about Hollow Knight too is I've also seen a lot of games with art styles that feel like they have more of like that puppet warp kind of animation.
Oh yeah,
you know what I'm talking about? And I know again that's a lot of times due to the budget and limitations because frame by frame is just like absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But Hollow Knight looks like it is that, but I think it's more frame by framey. Like the animations feel super slick, super smooth.
Yeah.
And it kind of like Tunic has that like bouncy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I think they call it like juicy, right?
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, like kind of vibe to it. Like yeah, everything just feels like I don't know, like yeah, like when you press a button, it feels very responsive, right? Did you beat that one?
I don't think so. Wait, no, yes I did. It was hard though.
I never got to the end. That game is like so much longer than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it was a long time ago when I played it, and I'm like anxiously waiting for the sequel that's been in development forever.
That's right, where you're going to play as the the other character, right?
Yeah, the one you fought at some point.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, I gotta get back to that one. It was such a long game, and I felt like I needed to take a break from it, and then I never got back to it, unfortunately. But what's cool about that one too, I guess going back to like what makes it an interesting art style is the fact that it's thematic, obviously, right? They're like bugs that they're referencing throughout the whole game. Like everything is bug related, larva related, so there's a very cohesive theme to it. And I was just thinking about with our game too, you know, the fact that he's in a forest. What we've tried to do, there's the forest aspect, and then there's the mechanical aspect. So with all of the environment art and the creatures and stuff like that, we're trying our best to meld that. And then there's the ancient civilization aspect as well. So I know that's something, you know, you being more of the environment artist, that's been a challenge to throw at you.
Because we're in a magical forest, and we have to cohesively integrate like these metal like assets in there. And it's like, oh man, because like, you know, we have like the ancients, and they're kind of more like rudimentary, like with the wood and stone and stuff like that. So it's been interesting sort of seeing how we approach these like sort of art styles and assets.
Yeah. And what's tough too is not only having to think about like on a technical level integrating them, but because there's so much, I guess this is why a lot of these games have vague stories, but it's like we're having to integrate a lot of the story elements into the art style and the props and the assets we're making as well. And I think just for other games, that's maybe something that might go underappreciated by just the general gamer. I think when you see a game that has a really cool art style, going back to our initial discussion about this, I think it's because the team has like almost overthought all this stuff out, right? So yeah, it's interesting to think about. Okay, so let me see some. Well, you said there was another game on here that you've.
Cult of the Lamb.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
What did you think about that one?
I remember like sending a screenshot in our Discord.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god, this is so cool.
Yeah.
It's like a pop-up book type style.
Yeah.
So freaking cool. Like I don't remember seeing anything like that before. Maybe I have, but I just thought that was like so visually interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's like stylistically, it's not necessarily my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Like it's not something I'd go, like that's not how I draw. That's not like the stuff that's not the art style that I follow on Instagram even, you know? But I definitely, when I was in the game, I loved it. I loved it. It felt right. It felt very cohesive as we've been kind of saying. So yeah, that was an interesting one because sometimes, especially being an artist, I don't know if you feel this way too, but an art style sometimes can almost turn me off from even wanting to play it.
Same.
Right?
For sure, yes.
And I don't know if that's just an artist thing or if it's an everybody thing.
I think we're kind of like art is sort of more in the front of our mind, but like, you know, the average person who might not be an artist, it might be more like subconscious, you know?
Sure.
They probably have, a taste for something, so they'll probably pass on certain art styles.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because there's been some games where somebody's recommended it to me, and I don't want to drop names. I can't even really think of anything off the top of my head. But like, I know people have been like, "Oh, you should try this game," and I'm just like, dude, I don't like how it looks. You know?
I know. Yeah, I feel that so hard though.
So yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing to think about as well. Okay, so another game that I just absolutely loved how it looked is Spiritfarer. Have you seen that game?
I've seen it. Not too closely, but I've seen like screenshots of it.
So Spiritfarer, I think the company is called Thunder Lotus. I think that's the studio name, but they made I think they're about to be on their third game. It's called 33 Immortals or something like that. And they had a game before this which is I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but actually no, they're about to be on their fourth game. The first one was, what was it called? Not Valhalla. it was like a Viking game. You know what I'm talking about? You played as this like redheaded little Viking character. It was like more of a top-down game, kind of like ours.
I don't know.
All right, well, I'll have to find that later. But what's really cool about these guys is this is actually one of the only other studios I can even think of off the top of my head that truly has that kind of cartoony 2D frame by frame animated style like we do.
That's cool.
Because even the Supergiant games, like all the characters in their games are 3D models, even though they feel like they're 2D. I think some of their backgrounds have 2D assets, but like this studio is like, from what I know about their development, like all 2D. Let's actually just look really quick. Thunder Lotus Games. Jotun. Or Jotun, however you say it. Have you seen this one before?
I haven't, no.
Yeah. So this was a cool one too. You could see like the boss, like you could just tell by the art style that it's not that puppet animation. It's like truly like they're just going hardcore frame by frame. So this was a pretty cool game. I unfortunately never beat this one either. Oh, and here you can see like
that's really cool.
Detail of the character. But I think that's what is really cool about the 2D style, like we were saying with the Prince of Persia game, is like look how exaggerated they can go with this character and the proportions and the emotion and everything. There's just like a quality you can't quite get in 3D.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
Or if you want to achieve a quality like this, it almost takes more money and effort than just doing it,
There's like just like even in the lines there's so much life in them and energy in them.
Yeah.
Be really hard to replicate in 3D.
Definitely. So, yeah, I know we're definitely crazy people for going full 2D with our game.
Well, how many frames did you say it took to do one weapon?
Oh my god.
Like 70 something?
Yeah, I think just the hammer attacks, it was like, I think it was like 80 frames of
80
animation.
frames, yeah. I remember you showed us on the stream.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to preface for anybody again that's like new to our podcast, but we're developing a fully 2D hand drawn frame by frame animation game, and it's due to limitation, honestly, and just knowledge. So when I started this project with Armand's a programmer, I'm an artist, and it was kind of just like, I'm just going to do the art style that I know how to do.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to just randomly learn 3D when I know generally how to animate. I know generally how to, do environment assets and concept art and stuff like that. So we just started rolling in this style.
Yeah.
But it's leading to literally thousands of frames of animation. So yeah, I mean, I love how it's looking so far, so I'm not going to complain, but it is a lot of work.
Yeah, no, I remember when Tyler Edelin, when I was taking his mentorship at the time, you approached him, I think, asking if he knew anyone that would be interested or be a good fit for the project that just happened to be taking the mentorship, and he sent me screenshots of like what your project looked like, and I looked at it and I was like, wow, I think I could fit in here.
Yeah.
So I was like super excited about that because our game has that like painterly kind of whimsy here and there.
Yeah.
And I thought I was so excited.
Yeah. It was very serendipitous because it was hilarious. He sent me a couple names and we saw your style, and your style first of all fit the most. But it was also like you just happened to live in the same city as us.
That was a big bonus.
It was so random, but it all worked out. So I guess it's meant to be,
Yeah, heck yeah.
So, okay, so here's some other games. I know we were kind of talking a lot about indies, but I'm just going to fire off a couple other ones that are not indies that I thought had very special art styles in particular. So, Ni no Kuni is a game that was literally partially developed by Studio. How do you say it?
I think it's Ghibli.
Is it Ghibli?
I think it's Ghibli.
Okay, Studio Ghibli. And that have you even seen this game?
I don't think so.
Dude, it straight up looks like a Ghibli film. And the story and everything, Ni no Kuni. This one also has more of an action style combat. It kind of has like a Pokemon sort of feel where you get these little monsters, and when the character's running around, the little monster guys run with you, and you can attack as them or switch to the boy and attack as the
What?
boy.
That's cool.
It's really cool. I love it.
I've never seen this.
Yeah. And it's just a beautiful, fun, whimsical, as you were saying, kind of storyline. And you know how all the Ghibli films kind of have that, like, they're really fun and colorful, but they have like super deep storylines to them. This is the same exact way.
Wow.
So I loved this game. I have the second one, but I haven't gotten too far in it yet, so I might need to revisit that. It's just obviously RPGs are so long. So
I know, right?
it's hard to be an RPG person because you're just like sinking hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is another one I think you would really like. This actually reminds me of another one I didn't put on my list because I haven't played it yet, but I just want to show you. And if anyone's in the chat that has played this game and is like, Nick, you have to play this, just let me know because I have it. I just haven't played it yet. But there's a game called Baldo, which is another indie game. And it looks like it was by Ghibli, but it's not. Like, they were just heavily referencing that kind of aesthetic and art style. But
oh, wow.
What's cool about this one, from what I know, is it plays more like a Zelda game, but it has that, Ghibli visual style to it.
It kind of looks like the textures on the 3D assets were hand painted.
Yeah, that's another thing I love too.
That's my favorite. Favorite 3D styles.
Then actually, man, I'm starting to think of more games just from talking. There's another game. Oh my god, what is it called? Battle Chasers. Have you heard of this?
No.
So, Battle Chasers was originally a comic book by, what is his name? So Airship Syndicate was the developer, and I believe they're actually an Austin studio.
Oh, fun.
But, oh my god, I cannot remember the artist's name off the top of my head, but he has a very specific art style to begin with. And what is so cool about this game is, like, they just nailed his art style in the video game. So this is more of a turn-based RPG kind of game, but the backgrounds, the environments, the aesthetic, everything is just absolutely gorgeous because it is very much hand painted. I'm trying to find, I guess I should type in the actual. This is another game I never ended up beating. I have it. I got to just get back to it. But I love this kind of look where it's like every single shot feels like a painting. And it's very, very well set dressed and thought out. And, they put the color, like they put lights to indicate where to go and, all that kind of stuff. So that was a really cool game as well. So this one's kind of a random one, but Yoshi's Woolly World, which was a Wii U game, had such a cool art style just because of what they decided to do with. This is maybe one of the only games on my list where it actually is like very much a 3D game and 3D techniques to achieve an art style that I thought was just so cool. So Yoshi's Woolly World is literally like Yoshi is made of yarn.
Wow.
And the whole game is made of like yarn.
Oh, that's sick.
And it was so pleasing, and it's not like a super hard game or anything. You play these games more just for because it's fun, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I just thought this was so cool. This is almost like the example of that Zelda game where it's like they were like, let's have a theme. It's yarn or it's plastic or whatever, and let's just roll with it and see what we can do. And I think Nintendo is a master at doing this, even all the way from the beginning. The first Yoshi game on Super Nintendo. Did you play any Super Nintendo growing up?
Like when I was single digits.
Yeah.
Like I played like Super Mario, Donkey Kong,
Yoshi's Island.
Oh yeah, I did play Yoshi's Island. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
So this one had like this storybook kind of look to it, and it was just so cool. This was so different for the time. I mean, they even somehow got like what looks like hatch marks
Mm-hmm.
in their textures. And this is one of those feats of engineering where it's like, how did they do this back in the day?
Yeah.
Like, did they just paint these pixels out, or was it some sort of shader that they were using? I'd actually be interested to see
Yeah, me too.
some sort of development with this. But yeah, I think that's a really cool thing as well with certain games, is like when you look at the game and you're almost like, how did they make this? You know, even being a game developer myself, like I feel like I know a decent amount of even higher budget production, but sometimes there's a game that comes along where you're just like, how did they put these things together, you know?
Yeah.
So, okay, another one I wanted to bring up, and this is another kind of weird one because it's not necessarily the full game style itself, like throughout the adventure, but it's the menus in Persona 5. And again, I'm pulling all of these I'll type in Royal. I'm pulling all these turn-based RPGs that I know you haven't played.
Yeah.
But this is another one. If you were to play a turn-based RPG, and I were to recommend any to you besides Final Fantasy because I'm biased, this is the one, because this game has one of the most interesting stories I've ever played in my whole life.
Really?
Do you know how these games generally work?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so you're always a school student, and it's like a day-by-day sort of thing. So you go to school during the day, and you get to decide what you want to do. Like, do you want to attend a certain kind of club? Do you want to, like, hang out with the girl you like? Do you want to, like, hang out with your guy friend and shoot some hoops or whatever? And all of these different things that you're doing throughout the day build relationships with different characters. And then at night, you always journey into a dungeon, and then your relationships with your characters kind of influence, like, I don't know, your abilities that your friends have, essentially. And what's cool about these games is it's always in like mini arcs of storylines. So you find a new character that you're going to eventually recruit as part of your crew, and there's a whole character arc with that character and what's happening with them. And it's just it's sort of a weird one to explain. I'm sure you're probably like, that sounds so boring, but there's just something about, like, I don't know, like the options in which you can kind of craft how the story ends up going. That is really, really cool.
There's really not any other game to compare it to, huh?
Not that I can think of, because it's almost like, I don't know if you've ever played any sort of like simulation games, like a dating sim game, or even like The Sims, like stuff like that, where you're kind of like talking to people and building up, like, it's like the character himself, like you get to decide if you want to have a job, and it's like that's how you have money to buy stuff, you know? But there's different types of jobs you can get, and there's different characters you can meet in the jobs, and all of these interactions then influence how the story progresses and what happens in combat. Essentially, like, this also has kind of a Pokemon light mechanic where you have these summon type things called personas, and your relationships with these characters influence the stats of different types of these monsters. And you can also get two monsters and combine them to make a new monster.
Oh, wow.
So there's like hundreds of these things that you can acquire throughout the journey as well. And that's kind of like what gives your character his like abilities, or the party's abilities. So it's got pretty deep mechanics. But going back to the art style, like, you look at a game like this and you're like, this has a very general anime art style, even though I think they've executed it very, very well. But what's really cool about this one in particular is the menus. Like, all of the UI in this game was so on point. And like, when you press pause, it's like all the little things like fan out. Really,
cool.
There's like nice sound effects for everything. And I think that's something that's very, again, underappreciated in certain games. But when it's done well, it's very obvious, you know? So like with our game, it's like, obviously there's so many resources that are going into the game assets itself, but we're still trying to find ways, like with the skill tree and stuff like that to like have things pop in and
the little motion graphics can go a long way.
Yeah. So I don't know. This game, out of any game I've ever played, though, has the most consistency and the most detail put into it. I mean, even like the fact that there's like silhouettes of the characters sometimes behind the menus, and like they'll change, and there's cool like patterns on stuff. I'm trying to see if I can find some more examples, but it's just like, I mean, this is like a showcasing, but this is like kind of how the style is. It's almost, again, kind of like a comic booky sort of style. And yeah, I don't know. It's one you kind of just this might be one you just need to try it and see if you're digging it. But if you give this game a good 30 minutes, you'll know if it's for you or not.
Got it.
Yeah. But be warned too, this is also one of the longest games I've ever played. It was like 130 hours.
Holy crap. When did this come out?
This came out. So what's weird about the Persona franchise is they released their base game and then they develop like a ultimate edition or whatever you want to call it next. So this is Persona 5 Royal, and essentially what they did with this one was they have the main game and then there's a full extra semester of school that you have to play through.
Wow.
So it kind of buffed out the story and they kind of changed a bunch of stuff. So they have done that with the past three, like Persona 3, 4, and 5, I believe. But this one, Royal, came out, I think, I think this came out like 3 years ago, something like that. So it's pretty new, yeah. Okay, it wouldn't be a Red Essence podcast without me talking about Final Fantasy in some capacity.
For sure.
So there is one Final Fantasy game in particular that I appreciated the art style, and I know this is one that people did not like the game, and or at least compared to some of the other ones. Final Fantasy fans, I feel like, hate all Final Fantasy games for some reason.
That's funny.
But I think Final Fantasy 12 has the coolest art style out of any of them.
Okay.
And I think, like we kind of mentioned briefly before, like you could probably even see in our game, like I'm very inspired by more kind of like ancient aesthetics, and particularly I really like the Middle Eastern aesthetic because of the pattern work and like the weird like archways and stuff like that. I just think it's so unique and beautiful, and Final Fantasy 12 leans into that real hard. What was so weird about this game was it is very much a fantasy game, but they're referencing Star Wars kind of stuff quite a lot. So it has like, and I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, but like there's like it's a political drama kind of storyline, I guess, more than anything. But let me just see if I can find one of like the actual city. But you can even see it in the character costumes in general. It has like a lot of ornate patterns and very intricate designs, and I definitely appreciate that. Man, I can't even find any city concepts, but you're in a big city for quite a lot of this. But yeah, I don't know. It's just this was one of those games. I mean, this came out on PS2 originally. I remember running through this world and just being like, this is so different from any game I've ever seen. You know, I don't even know how to explain it. It's just like, I know Final Fantasy always goes kind of crazy with the designs, but this one was just like super. Here's an example, right? Like even the pillars have like all of these patterns, and the ground has really detailed pattern work. I thought that was cool. So yeah, that's my Final Fantasy input for today's really podcast. Cool. All right, so Paloma, what do you think out of all of the games on your list is your top art style game?
So I would say my pinnacle, holy grail art style would be Ori and the Blind Forest.
Okay.
It's a 2D platformer, and they also have a sequel called Ori and the Will of the Wisps. And it's like the whimsy is pushed to 1,000, the atmosphere pushed to 1,000. It's bursting with color, bursting with emotion. and it's this beautiful painterly 2D style. And I was just like, so it just stuck in my brain for years, and I consider it like my top. Like, this is how I want my art to be.
Sure.
Yeah. And like, I want to make worlds like this, and I love the characters as well. I'm not completely sure if they incorporated any 3D in the 2D or in the characters, but maybe it's a combination.
So I do remember hearing a bit about their development, and this is just from what I remember, but I believe that the characters are modeled in 3D, but then they exported the animations as frames, I think. And the reason they got smoothness in their animations was they added motion blur to some of, like, to the frames themselves to give the in-between animations like that feeling like stuff's moving fast or whatever.
Right.
So that is a game that I've never played still.
Really? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Like, if you're ever in the mood for a good platformer, it's excellent. Like, you get more skills as you go. It's so fun, and it's like the whole package. You got the art, you got the story, you got the emotion. Like, it makes people emotional.
Got it. Yeah, Armand has played it, and he recommended it to me. I just haven't gotten around to it. And it kind of has like a Metroidvania feel, right? Like, you get abilities and you get to come back to an area to unlock new stuff, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that's one that I'll definitely check out at some point.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, so I don't want to cop out and say it's Zelda, but I think the Link's Awakening remaster just had one of the most... No, actually, you know what? I'm going to say Gravity Rush, honestly.
Okay.
That is one that I really want you to play, because I think that it's something that you're going to have a huge appreciation for the art style, but also it's one of those games I know we like to talk about, like, crazy story stuff, and you're going to play that and want to talk to me about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it has stuff where you're just like, whoa, I cannot believe they went there. So, yeah, Gravity Rush, I think, has the most interesting, unique art style of any game I've ever played.
Interesting. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we discussed a lot. I think this is a good point to kind of wrap it up. But thanks again for joining us. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Subscribing will, keep you posted when we put these out each week. And don't forget to check out Traveler's Refrain again on Steam, and please wishlist. That would also really help us out. So yeah,
All right.
Until next time.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.